Just bear with me. Sorry, this is okay. Okay, where are we? Pursuant, if you, any of you lawyers out there, these facilities are installed for the purpose of releasing microwaves or electromagnetic radiation into the environs. Now, pursuant to Section 11D of the Environmental Protection Act 1994, Queensland, electromagnetic radiation is classed as a contaminant, and pursuant to Section 10 of the said Act, contamination of the environment would occur if electromagnetic radiation were to be released into the environment. That's the law, okay? Now, the other thing I'd like to say is this. It's a contaminant, yes, but how can we apply that and how can we use that? Well, we can in some form, and we can put it in submissions. But the real trick is this. Put your hand up if you consent to being irradiated by your neighbour with a substance that is classed as a contaminant in the Environmental Protection Act. Put your hand up if you don't want that to occur. Okay. Right. So, are you scared of it? Okay. Right. Now, if you tell them, I don't consent to you putting that thing over there, and I don't consent to you putting that crap from that position over there onto my land, affecting my kids, etc. And you're going to threaten to harm me. Guess what? We have the Telecommunications Act, we have ACMA, we have all these wonderful acts that the federal government put in, but there's one thing the federal government cannot intervene with, and that is each state's criminal code. I've applied, folks, the criminal code in this action, all right? And I'm going to explain it to you. And I'm going to explain to you the criminal code so as you can have an understanding, and it makes it very simple. The law is actually a very simple thing when you apply it correctly. Pursuant to Section 245 of the Criminal Code 1899 Queensland, a person who strikes, touches or moves or otherwise applies force of any kind to another person, either directly or indirectly, without the other person's consent, or threatens to apply force of any kind to the person of another without the person's consent under such circumstances that the person making the attempt or threat has actually or apparently a present ability to affect the person's purpose, is said to assault that person, and the act is called an assault. Applies force has its own meaning in the criminal code. Applies force as per Section 245 of the Criminal Code includes the case of applying heat, light and electrical force of any substance or thing, whatever if applied in such a degree as to cause injury or personal discomfort. So what you have here, folks, the beautiful law, the good old criminal code, cannot be touched by the feds. Okay, that is our criminal code. These telcos cannot act outside of the criminal code. It's as simple as that. So, that's the next step. We've now established that if you so much as point that thing at me and it hits my body and I am in fear of that bloody thing, that's personal discomfort, folks. That's an assault. Stop it. Don't do it. So how do we stop them if they haven't actually done it yet? This is how I stop towers in their tracks that are already established, because they're currently assaulting. Ones that haven't been up there yet, that's a threat to assault. Does that make sense? So we're more on the threat side of it. I don't actually have to physically say I'm going to punch you. I just have to instill a fear that I'm going to cause you harm. Now, the trick is, folks, is this. You're a legend, mate. Thank you for holding it. Thank you, Lynn. So, how it works is like this. You can't, you have to have a reasonable belief that this thing's going to harm you. And this is what's been the problem in the whole fight with councils, with everybody. And this is how I applied it with Dundas Street, with Wilson's Creek and all the other ones that I've been working with. All right? If you come up to me and you say to me, hey, I'm scared of that tower. So say that.
Hey, I'm scared of that tower.
Okay, so you're scared of the tower, mate. Okay, well, have you got anybody else that can verify your opinion on that?
I believe so, yes.
Who?
Well, there's a number of people, including yourself.
Have you got an expert though?
Well, I have seen the National Toxicology Program do a study on cancer in 2G and 3G, so I'm concerned about the 5G.
Okay, so you're seeing something on the internet, okay. Is that a subjective view on it though?
I don't think so. It's objective science.
But it's your subjective opinion, isn't it?
Of course.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm being embarrassed here. Okay, so what I'm doing with him is his opinion, unfortunately, doesn't count. So if he sends a letter into the council and says, hey guys, I've looked at all these studies, checked them out, and as far as I'm concerned, I believe it's going to hurt me and harm me. I have a reasonable fear that it's going to hurt me, therefore stop. Councils listen to you, they go and think, okay, well, we've got all these public opinion, everyone's going, oh, great, they've sent all these letters in. None of it's backed up by any experts, but they've done it themselves. The council, if they reject a development, the telco will simply turn around and appeal the decision and say that the decision was based and flawed on subjective evidence. It's not expert evidence. That's how they win the appeals. That's why councils are scared to the proverbial, because you haven't armed the councils with the correct tools in order for them to fight these buggers. All right? Does that make sense? Now, if I said to you, this time I want you to say this.
Someone doesn't like him.
Okay, here we go. Look, mate, you're going to you're a bit worried about this stuff. Have you got anything to back up that you've got a reasonable fear?
Yeah, I have a medical certificate that backs up that I'm harmed by electromagnetic fields.
Oh, crap. Oh, do you? Really? Okay. I think we better shut down that tower then. That's the simple reality of it, folks. Okay? You need to, if you're going to complain to council, you need to put something in writing. Go and see your local GP, and all you got to do is say, excuse me, doc. Now, look, quite frankly, who are the experts here? The scientists or the doctors? What do doctors do? They look at the science and determine and evaluate for their patients whether or not their patients are at risk of harm, or they can diagnose or treat them for certain ailments. Did you know that electromagnetic hypersensitivity is classed as an ailment in Australian law? Did you know that? Okay. And there's a case called McDonald and Comcare, and I just happen to have the doctor as my expert, who was a witness in that case. Now, in that case, it was actually a scientist who worked for the CSIRO who actually had, he believed he had electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or he believed that the electromagnetic radiation was harming him. But he had no evidence of that. So he had to get doctors to sort of back up his claim. And guess what? The court said, look, we can't conclusively prove that the electromagnetic radiation harmed him, but what we can show is that he has a reasonable belief, because the doctors told him that the science sort of backs up what he's saying. That reasonable belief is enough. That's all he needs. So it's now becomes an objective test by an expert. That's the evidence we need, folks. You need to go and see your doctors. Say, look, folks, you don't have to say that all you got to say is, excuse me, doctor, I'm concerned about this tower. Can you please tell me whether or not it's safe? Have a look at the science. Come up to your own opinion. I want you to tell me categorically that this thing is safe and it's not going to harm my kids. Do you think any doctor's going to be able to write that and say, oh, it's perfectly safe, off you go? All right. All you need is something from a doctor that says that. And that is the evidence you need. Now, let's get to a panzer. In the guidelines, And I'd just like to... I've been working on this for years, and this is how it's all progressed and developed to this stage, okay? I hope I'm not over time. This here is the standard. This was set up in 2002, and this is the what we call the standard. And this is what industry uses when they set up towers and they set, manufacturers sell mobile phones and whatever. They have to comply with these standards, or so they're supposed to. But I want you to listen to this very carefully. This is in the foreword, and this was written by the CEO of Apanza at the time. His name was John Loy. And John Loy said this: the standard has been specifically devised to protect everybody, including children. The standard was developed by a working group of the Radiation Health Committee, and the starting point for the deliberations was a draft document initially prepared by the TE7 Committee of Standards Australia. As with the TE7 draft, the limits specified the standard are based on the published 1998 guidelines of the International Commission on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, or as we commonly call it, ICNIRP. Then he writes this: it is recognised that the standard does not operate in isolation from the legal framework within Australia. Relevant Australian occupational health, safety and environment laws provide obligation on employers and the designers, manufacturers and suppliers of plant or equipment to ensure that their activities or their plant and equipment do not represent a risk to the health and safety of their employees or third parties who may be affected by them. In effect, such laws require relevant parties to continually assess and improve the safety and health impact of their activities. This is telling the industry these are merely guidelines. If you're aware of a risk to the public health of someone through a doctor's certificate that's been handed to you from a person who's concerned, then you'll address your risk accordingly. That, folks, is called the precautionary principle. Okay? Now, further in the Apanza guidelines, you'll find that whenever you're trying to attack telcos, they'll always turn around and say, oh, but we're just following the Apanza guidelines. They've set the limits and that's it. Well, sorry folks, there's more to the guidelines than what you're trying to tell us, okay? This is in the standard. It's at page 41 if you want to read it, and maybe you should tell the telcos to read it too. Cases of neurological effects, particularly diasthy, which is abnormal sensations, have been reported after exposure to a wide range of frequencies, typically within the 10 megahertz to 2,450 megahertz. In some cases, symptoms are transitory but lasting in others. After very high exposures, there is evidence that nerves are grossly injured, but after lower exposures resulting in diasthic symptoms, ordinary nerve conduction studies find no abnormality, but current perception threshold studies may. Only a small proportion of similarly exposed persons develop symptoms. Well, a small proportion? Well, that's telling us that it affects people. Okay? So, what I'm trying to say to you folks is this. Now, since my work's been quite digging into their backside, so to speak, this is a typical lawyer. This is typical how lawyers work. We always say stuff that's backed up with evidence, okay? We never go and say stuff without it. So that's why I had to look for the document. Folks, this is a fact sheet on electromagnetic hypersensitivity that's been actually written by the Australian government and Apanza, saying, heading electromagnetic hypersensitivity. Well, if they're saying it doesn't exist, why the hell have they got a big fact sheet on it? All right. Now, this is what they advise. It says here, I've got it highlighted here. What does Arpansa advise? All right. On the basis of the current scientific information, there is no established evidence that EHS is caused by EMF at levels below exposure guidelines. That's their stance. Arpansa acknowledges that the health symptoms experienced by the affected individuals are real and can be a disabling problem, and advise those affected to seek medical advice from a qualified medical specialist. They're not telling you to run over to a scientist, they're telling you to run over to a doctor. That's what they advise. And that's exactly how I work. Go and see a doctor. Thank you. Now, has anyone heard of the Arpansa disclaimer, which was just very recently published? Okay. This is the nail in their coffin, so to speak. Well, Arpansa have started to realise that they're opening themselves up to huge litigation, and they put a disclaimer, which I think is really great of them to do that, because they're actually now admitting that if you've got a problem, you go and see a doctor. Don't rely on our guidelines. Go and have a chat to a doctor. Okay? Now, I'm going to read the disclaimer to you. Please. Ah, there we go. Okay. The Arpansa guidelines is this. This is on the website. It is for the provision of education and research information only. That's what they're saying. Always seek professional advice. This website is presented by Arpansa, and the guidelines are in the website, for the purpose of disseminating regulatory information and information on radiation and health free of charge for the benefit of the public. Read here. This website is not a substitute for independent professional advice. Nothing contained in this site is intended to be used as medical advice, and is not intended to be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, nor should it be used for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for your own health professional's advice. Arpansa does not accept any liability for any injury, loss or damage incurred by use or reliance on the information. That, folks, that disclaimer basically says, Arpansa, here's your guidelines. They're really saying a doctor's certificate reigns supreme. That's it, okay? And that's what we use, and that's how we bring these things down, okay? So, what do we do? All right? Get yourselves, go and see your doctors, have a chat, and then what you can go and do is have a chat to Lynn and a few other people. I'm trying to just empower you. Then what do you do next? Let's say you've got this doctor's certificate, you go and flush it out, then what do? Well, how do we apply the criminal code in the courts here in Queensland? You love my office? This is what I'm like in court too, by the way. I've got paper everywhere. Yeah. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a Q&A after this, so I better shut up very quickly. This will be the end of it, folks. Can you read that? This is called a Peace and Good Behaviour Order, and it's a self-help kit that you can get from the Caxton Legal Service. Have a read of it, okay? This is the information sheet on how to apply for a Peace and Good Behaviour Order. The best way to explain what a Peace and Good Behaviour Order is this. Are you familiar with domestic violence? Okay. If your spouse is hurting you or harming your kids, you can go and have a chat to the court and say, hey, or the police, and you say, I want a restraining order put on that person because they're going to assault my kids, or I think there's a threat of their doing it, okay? That's what a domestic violence basically scenario is. But when it's somebody that's not in your family, in Queensland we have what we call a Peace and Good Behaviour Order, which is basically a restraint order stopping an individual or a corporation from harming you or threatening to harm you. And that's how it works, all right? that's how we bring these people to account. We take them to the court. Now, I'm going to tell you how the success of this works. In the Peace and Good Behaviour Order, that you have to get a Justice of the Peace who has to look at the evidence that you provide, and they have to sign this, that prima facie, looking at the evidence, that they are convinced that you have a case to answer, and that they will issue a summons, a warrant of summons for them to appear in the magistrate's court to appear on the charge for a Peace and Good Behaviour Order. They'll be summoned to appear in court, and then you can get an order put on them to stop them from admitting against you for a period of 2 years. Okay? That's how you do it. Okay, I'm running out of time. So what I'm going to do now, I hope that normally these sort of things takes me hours to present. So I just hope I can try and empower you as best I can, and all of you together, work together as a community. You've sort of got the tools now. Just have a check on the internet. And if you need any help, just give us a yell. Preferably through Lynn, and I prefer that you all set up, because my phone doesn't stop ringing, people trying to help. So now what we've got now, folks, is Q&A. So if anyone's got any question whatsoever, now you can ask me a question. It can be anyone that's pro the tower or against it. That's fine. And Steve's going to be here as well. And Max. Where's Max? Okay, so any questions? We'll run a microphone out to you. Okay, we got one over from Vivian.
You were talking about the guidelines.
We're talking about guidelines, yes. We'll get a microphone to you, mate. Can we just hold it for a minute? Okay, Alyssa just wants to say something.
Aren't these guys amazing? Just absolutely amazing. The reason I'm putting in is I've got to go to a wedding, so I'm out of here, but I need to just say something very quickly. Thank you to everyone. We love this valley, we love this planet. Let's do what we can to keep it free. So we've set up a GoFundMe page, 5G, because we need some help. We flew this divine man up from Hobart. It's cost a lot for the flyers, etc., etc. If you can donate, there's also a donation jar over there. I just want to also thank all the volunteers. It is a village, it is a community that creates this change, this global change that we're wanting. Fall in love with your environment and your children, and we will see this shift. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Lynn, and Dorothy, and John, and Karen, and Carol, who've been like the mainstay behind it, and the beautiful singers.
And
Thank you,
Ed.
my God. Ed. Where's Ed? And Ed. Yeah, Ed's behind us. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Thank you.
And folks, you're probably wondering, when I first spoke to Lynn, and Lynn gave me a call, and you can understand my phone rings red hot, and it's very hard to get me, by the way. She finally got me, and I spoke to her, and then she talked about this beautiful village, this eco village that's in the Currumbin Valley. And then I found out it's got world class awards. You're like the world leader in eco sustainability, and I could see that this was a real showcase. This is the reality of it, folks. This is a great vehicle in just the very fact that you have an eco village. What's the whole purpose of an eco village? Okay, to basically be with the environment and look after the environment and live with the environment in harmony. I don't know if you knew it, but there is a natural radiation which I believe is 7.62 hertz, which is the natural frequency. The issue is that all this man-made radiation, what I'm trying to tell you is there's no white zones. You have a perfect opportunity to lobby your government to set this up as a conservation area under environmental values, that it should be a buffer from this stuff. Okay? There's nowhere in the... That's how I see it as the future for you. All right? And that's why I'm here, is to try and help you and to try and focus and because if you realise that you're not the only people. This is Australia-wide phenomenon. It's worldwide. Okay? And you're just the very fact that there's so many of you here, and I know you're going to spread the word, and we'll win the fight. We're winning it already. Crikey, we stopped 4G, 5G, TPG, we stopped Telstra up the road. This is just in your little area. Let's do something about this thing over here. Okay, thank you. Right, Q&A.
Thank you, Ray. Just regarding the white zones, if people use a computer, www.emrsanctuary.com, Peter Nielsen in Byron Bay is setting up a thing to introduce people who want to buy into white zones or live in white zones. But my question is this, when you talk to these
Can you put it closer to you?
when you talk to these telecom people, they don't say we're following the guidelines, they say we're following the Australian Standards Authority. So they're claiming they're following the law. So how do you answer that, please?
Well, quite easily, you just say, well, look, we're not following the guidelines because the guidelines say you must address, you're aware of a risk, you must address it. And the way you've got to reduce that risk, how are you going to do it? I've told you that this is dangerous to me because the doctor's told me that it's going to harm me. It's a risk to my health. What are you going to do? It's in the too hard basket for them. That's the reality of it. Okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Feel free, this is your chance. Huh?
What's the little gadget that you use?
Okay, the little gadget. You get it all over the place. Now, look, I'm going to tell you something too. This little gadget, I could not use that in court of law at all. Because we'll be there forever trying to explain, the technicalities behind the device and everything. I'm only using that as an example, okay? It's just an example. But the thing is, it's made by Digitech, okay? Digitech. You get it from JCar. I actually got these for $10 each, so they're actually on special at the moment. Little red one you want?
What are they called?
They're called a smartphone electromagnetic sensor plug-in module. Okay, and it's designed to read magnetic voltage meter readings. Okay, that's it. There's other devices as well. This one's that Steve's got, it's called an electro-smog meter by Cornet. And there's all different types you can get. Okay, does that help your question? Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, sure can, Lynn. Yeah.
Could you please talk to the actual, what is the difference between, say, 4G and 5G infrastructure and what it means to where we live and how it will invade our backyards?
All right, well, first of all, you're not getting rid of 4G. Okay, it just means a generation. See, your first generation, second generation. First generation was just basically mobile phones. Second generation, I think it was internet. Then third generation, they brought data, which is texting. Fourth generation is broadband type arrangements. I'm not really high tech on that. But 5G is a completely different beast. You still have all those other Gs. Okay? They're putting an extra thing on, and it's actually a directional beam this time. And it's a lot more powerful. So 60. Steve will explain, he's better at me.
So with the different G technologies, they're using different frequencies and different modulation patterns. With 3G, 4G, you've got a range of many, many kilometres. With 5G, they're going to reuse a lot of the existing frequencies, but they're also looking at much higher frequencies. And the problem with higher frequencies are that they don't have very good penetration power, so they can't penetrate leaves, they can't penetrate walls. So that means you have to have a lot more towers. So instead of having one tower that services an area of 20 square kilometres, you'll have to have one every 200 metres. And the other difference is too, when you look at the existing infrastructure, the panels sort of are quadrants. They handle a certain zone in terms of the radiation. And when you have a call, that radiation goes out through that quadrant, so it's blasting an area. With 5G, you could say there's a benefit with what they're using is called beam steering, that they'll direct the radiation directly to the person, so you're not going to get a lot of scatter all over the environment, but it can possibly exceed the limits. And see, 5G is also, again, using the existing technologies that are in place as well.
Just to back that up, the difference between, with 5G, you might have this, you have 5G, you have to have a lot more towers. So that's when you'll start having one on every single street. They'll put poles in every single street with small cell facilities because they can't get the distance. That's what 5G is. So instead of, and that's what we stopped in Dundas Street, because they were trying to put a small cell facility right about 6 metres away from the child's bedroom. And that's how it started. And so, in essence, for them to implement... Thank you. So that's probably the best way to explain it. I know there's talk about it being a weapon for war and all that sort of stuff. There seems to be correct that it was developed for that. There is that show called, there's a program you can see, it's called 5G, The Apocalypse, the extinction event, that talks about that. There's a lot of good stuff in that. Some of it, it's a little bit, but the majority of it's quite good, and it talks about the US and they're having the same problems we've got here.
You've got it running in the tent.
You got it running in the tent if you want to see it, and it's freely available. Anyone can watch it. Anything else? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was just wondering if any of you are aware of any pre-existing conditions that may be exacerbated by exposure to electromagnetic fields.
Yeah, look, EMR is a stressor to the body. So if you have a chronic illness or an immune condition, perhaps an allergy, that can be exacerbated by exposure. Absolutely.
Look, the best way to explain it, if you think you've got fibromyalgia, or you've got MS type symptoms, MCS, medical, chemical sensitivity type issues, those sorts of things, chronic fatigue, buzzing in the head, those sorts of things, fogginess, nosebleeds, those sorts of things. Go and, I mean, I'm not trying to alarm you, but just go and have a chat to your doctor. Sometimes, a lot of people with EHS, because they haven't been able to diagnose it as being an actual EHS as such, they've actually worked out and said, well, let's put in the two hard baskets. So they tended to put them into fibromyalgia categories and put them into the two hard baskets. Oh, you've got that. But look, we'll find out in years to come. This is the start, and obviously the momentum's speeding up very, very quickly. All right? And I hope that answers that question. Yeah. Anyone else? Yep, we've got a gentleman over the back there. Yep. Our gentleman over here. Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Just the question is, yesterday we did watch that Apocalypse documentary, and in 1996, Bill Clinton passed a law in the States where he made it impossible to make any
A health complaint. Yeah.
any health complaint against the telecommunications.
Well, that's not the law here.
No,
Mhm.
no, that's not setting a precedent.
No. American law is completely different. We don't even follow American law as a rule. We follow